Hello. This is going to be a painting live stream. Last time painting seems to have done well, so we'll see if we can do well again. What I've got here is Drath, who is Andy Smith's character. He's a new barbarian character. I've been waiting a long time to have some type of new fantasy type character. So, as it says in the title, this is watercolor paper. And I'm going to be using acrylics. Drath I did a little bit more detailed than everything else because he is the most important thing in the scene. So everything else I'm going to play with a little bit. I'll be going for a while. We'll see if anyone shows up. Starting early. Canson watercolor paper. 9x12. 140 pound. In case anybody really was wondering. I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to painting. I guess I'm a little bit of either traditionalist and not so much a traditionalist. And what I mean by that is I like to do an underpainting. That's the long and the short of it. Especially with acrylics. And you can do anything for an underpainting. You can do greens, browns, orange, red. I like to use tones of brown. Because what I'm doing is I'm getting a value scale like I did with the Copic markers. And then when it dries, painting over it. So that's the good thing about acrylics is that they dry fast. I guess process of elimination says I'm going to use Van Dyke brown and a little alizarin crimson hue. And I'll probably lighten it with either white or yellow, but I'm probably going to do a little bit of white if necessary. Scratch that alizarin crimson. I'm going to use light red just because it probably will take less to get what I'm trying to get from there. If you're looking at this picture pretty close, you'll see it's not perfect. It really doesn't have to be. What it has to be is a good idea of where I'm going. So I've got water. I do have a thinner. I'm going to run and get that real quick. Wasn't very far to run. Okay. Go thinner. Golden Opens is what I'm using. I'm pretty sure this dilutant is also water-based. Acrylic is kind of interesting to work with because it's a little bit watercolor and a little bit kind of liquid vinyl. That's why when it dries, it's not watercolors and you can't just wipe it away. But you got to let it really, really dry. However, for a long time, you can kind of loosen it up and start back over. Some people don't like the idea of using water to thin acrylics because acrylic is not straight water-based paint, and they think that they break down the molecules and it really doesn't hold up. I've been painting with acrylic for a long time, 25 years or better, and I have not found that really to be an issue. All the same, I do like this thinner because another thing that it does is it keeps the acrylic, which is a fast drying paint, from drying too fast. Main things that you need really to paint with acrylic are water and or thinner, paper towels, which is very important, I use a paper plate for a palette. There are paper pages for palettes. They're like it's a wax paper page that some people use for palettes. Another thing you can do to mix up brown or different tones of brown is to mix red and green, blue and yellow, pretty much any complementary colors. Will do the trick. The theory is if you mix two colors together that are complementary, which are really colors that are opposite that help each other kind of stand out, that it becomes a muddy or neutral color. That's why I'm adding a little bit of yellow to this mixture before I even begin. So my main concern right now is doing the tonal underpainting. So I'm going to do this in steps. So anyone that's curious can follow along and build an underpainting like I am. I'm really particular about the color brown that I'm using, so. Hi, Vincent. Yeah, I do recognize you. So because I'm particular about the color brown I'm using, and I've got red up there, I'm going to use ultramarine blue. Never mind, I'll use sap green. There's quite a bit of yellow in the sap green. But like I was saying, if you mix red and it's opposite, you get a muddy color. See? You get a brown. It's how much of each, see the different brown that I get from here, how much of each component and you get a really dark brown that way, which is almost that Van Dyke brown. Lighten it up with just a little bit of red. Probably tap a little yellow into it because I don't want. So I'm trying to create enough color also to do this underpainting. Yeah, it's a much closer color to what I want. So you can add white to lighten the value, but the problem with adding white is it also changes the consistency. And I don't have a mixing white, I have a titanium white. Which do I prefer, painting with oil or painting with acrylics? Painting with acrylics. Well, actually, there's no single answer. It just depends on what I'm doing. The main reason that I don't paint with oil more often is that oil, you need a pretty well ventilated place. Otherwise, you're poisoning yourself. And since I have all kinds of crap wrong with me already, I don't want to add to it. So acrylics, the least concern. Vincent, this is open thinner for the open acrylics that I'm using. A little dab of that will make sure that this doesn't dry. It thins it a little bit, but it also makes sure it doesn't dry, and that's the main thing. Now I'm going to take this off to the side a little bit and mix up a thinner consistency, because what I'm doing is painting in layers. Everything that I'm going to paint, whether it be oils, watercolors, acrylics, casein, gouache, everything is going to be in layers. A little bit more careful with gouache, though, because gouache can literally reactivate to a point where you really can't control it. So I want a pretty thin coat going in to start. This is the shadowed side of his back, so I'm not really overly concerned with that. I don't want to get so dark that I can't see the rendering lines, the shadowed lines. And another thing, just YouTube right now. I'm still kind of figuring this stuff out. Until I do, I don't want to go on multiple media. Dabbing a little bit of water on the end of the brush really thins the consistency. Now, I'm not too worried about screwing anything up, because the great thing about acrylics as opposed to watercolors is that if you don't like it, you can just paint over it. And you can wipe it off with your finger. I do have different size brushes, and I'm going to pull them into account pretty soon. I want to scale up, since there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background right now. I'm going to pause the sound for a minute. This is an older brush, so it tends to not be as minutely controlled as I would like. But like I said, this is a base layer. What I'm really doing mainly is a layer of values from light to dark. Yeah, I shut the sound down because there was noise in the background in the kitchen. And I didn't want you guys really blasted with crinklies and fridges slamming and whatnot. I actually gave everybody a warning that I was going to shut it down for a little bit because of that. And I'm not talking the whole time. If I look up and see you ask a question, then I'll answer it or do my best to. But serve you better if I pay attention to what I'm doing and explain the nuances than just gabbing at my cell phone when you're not paying attention. You couldn't? Well, that's because I muted some then too, and I turned the mic back on once it got quiet again. It's quieter now than what it was before. I still hear a little bit of shuffling around, but not what I was hearing when I shut the mic down. Anyway, I shut it down for everybody else's benefit. So, one thing I'm doing, if nobody's noticed, is when I hit the thinner, to get it to continue to be lighter than what I'm doing before I dip it in the thinner, I paint towards the darker instead of the other way around. And see, every time I go over it, it's going to darken a little bit. Some is fine being darker, some not so much. I want it lighter. When I dip in the thinner, it blends with whatever it hits. And that works out all right when I come back in and darken stuff up, but sometimes I want it even lighter. And I don't want to darken any of it up. This, as I said in the beginning, is an underpainting. So I fully intend to paint over it. Let's see. I don't know anything about Michael D. Mattisi's Facebook. I don't really hang out on Facebook too much. That's more of if I am hunting someone down in specific or am talking to someone that I already know. I hang out on Twitter more than Facebook, but I don't really hang out too much on any of it. I'm on YouTube a lot. Dan, have I ever messed up with watercolor? You remember the saying about tattoo artists? It applies here too. I paint everything in layers, whether it's watercolor, acrylic, oil, casein, gouache. I'd said this a little bit before, but I paint watercolor in layers too. And to the uninitiated, they may not realize what exactly I'm talking about. But I don't paint like an underpainting for watercolors. But I do layer them and blend them as I go to the effect that I want to get from them. Let's see. Call for dynamic life drawing. Oh, messed with? Well, yeah. Yes, I have. I guess I misread that. You didn't see watercolors that I've done? I've got a whole book of watercolors. Let's see. It's a book called Force for Dynamic Life Drawing. Dynamic life drawing. Is that what you're talking about? Or is it Force for Dynamic Life? I've never heard of it either way. There are artists I follow on Facebook that do life drawing. Steve Houston's one of them. He does a lot of life drawing and invites you to. He'll, like, if you follow him, then when he does, he'll hire a model, and when he hires a model, he will allow anyone that wants to draw along with him. And I've done that a time or two. But it's not, I mean, it's like a 5 minute, 3 minute, 1 minute thing and then a break, something like that. I do life drawings, but not as often as I'm composing for something specific. You never seen it, huh? I know you saw the early days of painting with acrylics. I don't know if you saw me painting with oils. Just so happens I have some watercolor stuff right at hand. You hear that crinkling? Much like watercolors, every time you go across the acrylics, unless you're just using like straight thinner or something, it will darken. Here's some straight thinner. See, it didn't darken, but it'll blend. Unfortunately, that'll be wet for a while now. And I'll have to work someplace else for a little while. Yeah, I understand that, Vincent. I know that you're trying to learn to draw for comic books. This is a comic book character, too. That's why there's all the line work. If I was just doing a normal, regular painting, I wouldn't do so much line work or so much spot blacks like that. They would be painted in dark browns or maybe greens or different tones. And that's why I'm doing this underpainting, is to kind of show you like a basic idea. Let me see if I got something right in this book. I don't. But I do have my watercolor kit. Which has got watercolors and gouache in it. Little tiny watercolor sketchbook. These colors look a little bit brighter on screen than they do here. That's some really soft, darker reds. They look bright red there, but they're not. The eyes are actually orange. It really looks brighter. Remind me and I'll bring this kit along next time I come up to visit. You recognize that guy, I'm sure. Shit, I'll have to bring this kid up, and next time we're hanging out, I can show you some tricks for watercoloring. This book is a little bit bigger. That's gouache. I guess this is not really true tone on the photographs. This is not finished, obviously. This is an underpainting for Amanda. Couldn't tell, right? It's something I'm working on for actually the story I'm writing right now. This the prequel to this story. Now back to this before it dries out. This could dry a little bit if it wants to. Because this is acrylic, and that's really the only reason. Well, like if I was doing oils, I'd be doing this too, but because this is acrylic, I'm doing an underpainting that I don't care a whole lot about the details of. I'm just trying to get it to just trying to get it to lay those values out. The next step is the next layer. But I'm not waiting for this to dry to go back over this. There's a whole this to do. So what I'm trying to get is a tone. I'm trying to get you to, or for me, when I'm going back to paint this in the end, I want to know where the dark areas and the light areas are, where the muscles bunch and where the light's shining on them. The key to this, the key to all art really is patience. And if you're in a rush to get things done, you're probably not going to do the job that you can do. And you see also that I'm determining which side's getting hit in the shadow and which side's getting hit by the light. All of this is going to get covered. When you're doing an underpainting, that's the whole point. You want everything to get a coat, everything, so that there's no white paper at all. Then when you come back and do colors, you know that you've got that color in there and you don't see any little white specks through it because you've already covered it. But also, you're talking about comic books. Glenn Fabry talked about this in painting, that he would do a brown undercoat underpainting like this and then come back over with blues, which are the opposite of brown. And if you do the the brown is a mid-tone, the blue is a sharp color. And if you come over it with the blue and then leave certain spots. Now, a lot of the brown that he was using has got a little bit more orange tone, which is why I pulled out the red. But it wasn't really doing what I wanted it to do, so I'd rather go with this where I just know the tones are coming out right. And this is, I'm going to have to adjust the color on my camera, but for now you can see the tones are coming out, and that's the important thing. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is, like I said, this is the first of 2 streams. There's no way that I'm going to paint this all tonight. And I don't want to paint it all tonight, really, because my brain's going to need a break. So the first stream, the idea is to get all the basics laid out so you know the tonal values when you come back to it. You know where you're going to paint darker. You know where you're going to paint lighter. What color are you going to paint darker or lighter? That doesn't matter as much as matching up the tones. If you see darks where it's supposed to be dark and lights where it's supposed to be light, your eye is going to believe what it's saying. And that's as an artist, what your hope is that you're going to convince the viewer to believe what you're showing them. Even if you're a comic artist or whatever, that's the idea. When you're creating a background or you're creating vehicles and all that stuff, the thing is that you want them to have a believable environment. What color is that environment? Well, it depends on whether, say, lights are flashing. If blue lights are flashing, it's going to be tones of blue. I mean, there's going to be grays, there's going to be tones of blue. There's going to be tones that look like other colors but aren't other colors. That's all stuff that you got to kind of predict or project. Are you going to be doing black and white comics, color comics? Are you going to do coloring? Do you want to learn to color? All of this is important in storytelling. Colors also, by the color you choose, you can give somebody a feeling, or you can elicit emotions through those colors. It's important where you want to go with it or what you want to do with the art. And I think you've seen me ask that in the room a couple of times. What is it that you want to do with it? That's an important question, because I can't tell you what to do with it. You have to know where you're going. And that's that pre-planning or sketching or doing layouts and stuff like that. You're basically planning on what you want to do with the picture in the end. A lot of colorists for comic books do a flat neutral layer, a gray layer, and then they build their colors off of that after it for the same reasons that you're not missing stuff. Okay, more red, more sap green. And a little bit more thinner. So now that I've created the brown, I'm just going through with the thinner so that I can get the lighter effects. And that pure thinner again. Yes, I do digital paint. I have CSP. I don't do it as often as I do traditional painting, but I can't just carry around my painting tablet to anywhere I want to. It is not that small and it's not that easy to lug all the stuff around that I need to be able to do it. Doesn't have a hard cleanup, obviously, but I would have to drag my laptop around and really I don't want to. I don't color on a tablet. I don't have a tablet, so I do a monitor tablet. So it's larger too, and I can actually draw on the screen. Something about me and the control, I guess. I have a hard time relinquishing control. I want to know exactly what I'm doing when I'm doing it. Like when I started this, I said, I'm not really too worried about it because I can always paint over it. But you see, I'm still trying to take the time to develop all the muscle bunches and tones. And I'm not just slopping stuff on here all the time, really trying to build it. That's not to say that it's not perfectly reasonable to slop stuff on here, because it depends on the type of artist you are. Some of them are more comfortable doing it that way. I'm just not. Once I figure this thing out a little bit more, I probably will play around with some digital paints for people to see when if they have questions and stuff, and they want to learn a little bit about digital painting that they don't feel like they can by just buying it, or they can't afford to buy it without knowing what's going on or whatever. I don't know if you can see it, but when you use a lot of thinner in a spot, it very, very kind of muddies it, as opposed to how potent it is over here. It's very muddy over here. I don't mind it being a lighter, muddier. I don't mind it being a lighter, muddier underpainting, but once I get to the regular painting, I don't want it to muddy unless I want it to muddy. Nope, this is from my cabinet, but we probably shopped at the same place to get it. Actually, wherever we went, I can't remember. She found a sale on like different paper plates and paper cups and paper bowls, and she just bought a whole bunch of them because you could mix and match for the sale. So benefit for me. Benefit for all of us, really, but I'll hang on to this paper plate for a week or some shit like that, sometimes even more, because these paints take a little while to dry. They don't, like, they dry quicker on the paper than they dry on the plate, on the palette. So, and I've mixed blender into it, so that slows it down a little bit more. But yeah, I'll hang on to it as long as the colors don't become a plastic lump. Once they become really a vinyl lump, that's what acrylic turns to, is vinyl. Was originally, acrylic was made for painting on film. A fact I learned from James Gurney, who has painted on film. He painted the backgrounds in Frank Frazetta's Fire and Ice, along with Thomas Kincaid. Imagine that. He said when they got done painting Fire and Ice, they hopped a train and just went around the country. Like hoboed it around the country painting. Like I think that's pretty amazing. You can never get away with that shit these days, but no way you walk into a restaurant or whatever and do a drawing and ask and trade it for food or whatever. No one, they're gonna do that shit nowadays. Everybody's too interested in the money, which, you know, I don't blame them, but there is something missing from it. I am definitely capitalist enough to want to make a living. Well, James Gurney's a legend on his own. That's why I recommend you check his books out. he's got probably more to teach than I'll ever learn. And a lot of the stuff that he's teaching, he learned on the go. But yeah, to work with Frank Frazetta, that would have been amazing. I just missed him. He died just before I really got a chance to go to the Frazetta Museum. And what really, really sucks is that he regularly allowed artists to stay with him. Like they crash at his pad and eat dinner. His wife would cook dinner and they would talk movies and he would talk about painting because he was passionate about what he did. Man, if only, right? If only. Just a little bit, just enough to not be able to say, I learned at the feet of the master. I don't even know where I was. There's no good excuse. I should have been there. He inspired more people to learn art than anybody else that I know of. In comic books, in fantasy painting, in anything. Inspired me, definitely. I wouldn't be into fantasy without Frank Frazetta. I'm sure there would be a fantasy, but it would be nothing like what it is. It's funny how you learn these things way late. Oh, yeah. But the thing is that I know a lot of artists that have actually met and hung out and had lunch and learned to paint with Frazetta, had them critique their work. And he was very generous. It's pretty amazing for a guy as talented as he is. He regularly gave his art away. He would do a drawing for somebody and give it to him. That stuff's worth probably hundreds of thousands of dollars now. And they're just quick sketches. But he did it because he loved people and he loved to draw for people and be a part of their lives in that manner. And a lot of them did like sell things on eBay and it broke his heart. So Ellie kind of put a stop to him giving his stuff away. She's also famous for taking his museum keys away because he would regularly go back out in the museum and start reworking paintings. Which I guess just goes to show you that no matter who you are and what step of the journey that you're on, you always feel that you didn't do well enough or you could do better. And that's a perfectly valid feeling and a pretty cool lesson thinking about one of your heroes doing that. Yeah, Death Dealer, he did 5 of them. He died before he finished the 6th, I think. Might be the 7th. But even the original Death Dealer, the Molly Hatchet cover, the original one, he went back in and painted over. Like, he didn't paint over it all, but he changed the color scheme and he changed some of the values and he changed his idea of what the helmet should look like. I think that's probably about the point in time where Ellie was like, no, give me the keys. She was a pretty amazing woman, too. I don't know if you know this, but Ellie was Ken Kelly's aunt. Um, she was quite the artist in her own right, but she gave it up because she wanted she she thought that Frank was a better artist and she wanted him to succeed in what he was doing. Without her, companies would own the art when they contracted or commissioned something to be done. Ellie was a force for Frazetta keeping his own paintings. That's why some of his Conan paintings aren't called Conan; they're called the Barbarian or something similar, because that way uh, it doesn't intrude on copyright. But yeah, can you imagine? All of Frazetta work just disappeared, and that was kind of part of the issue. Is some of the stuff that he did in his early days, they didn't do anything with it. They did the ad or whatever they did with it, and then they just shoved it off to the side. Apparently, there's a story about one guy. When a company closed down, he moved a bookshelf, and behind it there was a fucking stack of Frazettas, which he just pretty much gave away. I don't think that Frazetta had imposter syndrome. It's the other way around. It's like, this isn't worthy yet. It can be better. This isn't the best I can do. It can be better. And he pushed because he wanted to be better. Most of the stuff that he did kind of fit that category. He took what was there and made it better. Some of the paintings he did, he lifted figures from. There's old classic paintings that he loved that you probably would have seen the Conan painting. It was his first one. I think it's called The Conqueror now, where Conan's surrounded by a crowd of people and he's like jumping up with his axe and slamming it down. Originally, he was strangling somebody, but the bodies that are laid around at his feet, some of them are actually dead lifts from other classical paintings. And I don't think of it as like he was stealing or trying to claim credit for it, as much as it was an homage to his heroes, his artistic heroes. At least that's what I'd say. I'm the one saying it, I guess. Can you see it pretty well? You think it looks pretty good? Like I'm seeing on a very small screen, so. I'm also not overly worried about it, like I said, because this is an underpainting and it's not the finished product. More open acrylic thinner. I don't know if I've got a blank spot on the plate, but I need to thin out what's on the brush even more. So noses, I've said this before, I don't know if anybody picked up on it, but noses are generally red. So that's why I kind of did that little swath on the bottom of his nose, because generally it's going to be some tones of red. Forehead's usually a little bit more yellow. So I want to get that a little bit thinner on the forehead. And then as you go down the face, it gets grayer. So a little bit less concern as I get down on the face. And obviously where the shadows are falling. Another good thing about that thinner is it allows you to shape your brush. What is my favorite painting by Frazetta? That's a tough call. I have Moon Girl. It's not the actual painting, it's a reproduction. But I have that. That's one of my favorites. Obviously, everybody loves the Death Dealer. I really loved Fire and Ice as a kid, so the cover of Fire and Ice will always be a little bit more in my favorites. Oh, there's so many of them. It'd be easier for me to name the ones I didn't like, and that's I'd have to hunt them down. I mean, no artist is 100%. I mean, no artist hits 100% all the time, but if there was one that was close, that would be the one. What I loved about his paintings, especially when you see them up close, is that there are little color nuances. So he would paint a section like this and say it was purple. There would sure as shit be some gold in that section, even though it's an opposite color, even though it's a complementary color. He would find a way to bring that value into it, or something maybe red or blue or green and purple. But you wouldn't even notice unless you're looking really, really close. And that's pretty friggin' amazing to not notice something that sharp unless you're looking right dead on to it. I don't know of anyone else that, I mean, I know of imitators, but I don't know of anyone else that creates like that. And I don't mean to sound down on the imitators because every painter I know is somewhat of an imitator. I mean, who's not inspired by Frazetta after all? But Frazetta had a saying that he would rather see uh, a good you than an excellent copy of him. That's something I've always found pretty amazing too, is that not only did he support the idea, he promoted the idea of creating on your own. Like, he didn't tell you you had to do it this way. And like, when I'm teaching, I try not to do that. I try not to tell you that you have to do this way. What I'm trying to tell you is, this is my way. This is the way that I'm the most comfortable doing, achieving this look. There is no set standard to say that you can achieve a certain look a different way, because that would be bull. There's so many different ways to achieve a really good look. You may notice that I'm painting over the blacks. There are a few reasons for this. One of them is to get rid of that color discrepancy between real black and brown black mixed black. You can tell painters mix their own black instead of using a direct black. And that's something like the next stage of this painting video. That would be the next thing, is discussing how I get some of these colors. But first, need a base. So what's your favorite painting by Frazetta? I like the cave monster too. It's one where a warrior is fighting a monster coming out of a cave. That depends on, well, it depends on what you're talking about. When you say company, you're talking about a comic company, or you're talking about a book company, an album company? Because a lot of these guys, they're not going to try to dictate style to you. They're going to try to tell you what they want for an effect. What they know is what sells a book. Like, they know what they can use. Like, if they're doing science fiction, they want to see certain elements of science fiction on that cover. Some of them, even if they're not in the book. Now, if you're talking about comics, generally they don't want you to mimic somebody's style nowadays. They want you to have enough of your own style to draw a crowd. If you have something to draw on, some way of drawing people in, that's better for them. Like, for instance, John Buscema. John Buscema was an excellent draftsman, but when you came into Marvel, that's what you were expected to do, is to kind of follow the cues that John Buscema, John Romita Jr., and all of them followed, but that was Jack Kirby that introduced them. And this is about drafting and about approach. What Jack Kirby did that was so amazing that these guys mimicked his style was to give his characters weight. It looked like they were planting their feet and they had some substantiality to them when they were planting their feet. When you look at Galactus, you thought Galactus, if he landed on you, you'd be nothing. Yet there were other comics earlier in that time that just were very simple. So he gave all of his character dynamism and weight. It looked like they were landing hard. It looked like they actually weighed something, and it looked like they were coming out at you. Whether you liked his execution, style of detailing, amount of realism, or any of that, that's irrelevant, because that's not what he was about. It was about being in your face, like getting those characters reaching out of the screen at you. So when you're talking about a house style, that's pretty much, for the most part, what you're talking about comic book wise. I mean, like Jimmy Reyes, as an example, and I should probably not name names, but I'm going to anyway. He made it obvious with the first run of Dragon's Rage that what he considered to be good comic art was as much like David Finch as it could be. Now, I like David Finch, obviously. That's why I moderate his fan channel. But I like a lot of different comic artists for a lot of different reasons. David Finch likes a lot of different comic artists for a lot of different reasons. He is no more sold on just one comic artist than any comic artist, except pretty much Jimmy, because Jimmy was all about Dave. I think because he was enough friends with Dave to get Dave to do some work, and he liked his style. Dave's got an awesome style, obviously, and he's got great storytelling ability, and I will not say anything negative about Dave, because there's nothing negative to say. But he's not the only style. He's not the only one. I am a big proponent of Frank Miller's. That's not to say he's the greatest artist. Frank Miller is not the greatest artist. He is a great storyteller. And in comic books, it's storytelling over art. And if you notice, there's a lot of artists out there that aren't very good, but they are great storytellers. And if they can convey that story, if they make you want to see what's going on or want to turn the page, that's what a company is looking for. A company is looking for images that read well, images that are in a believable setting, and images that move the story. Those are the big three. And obviously you have to know your anatomy, and obviously you have to know enough about your basics to be able to draw a car if a car needs to be drawn. But there's a lot of comic artists that don't draw cars very well and they're still employed. Why are they employed? They can tell a really great story. Look at Ron Garney. I've been talking about him for years, and a lot of people are like, who? Well, I first saw him on Conan and Daredevil, and he's got a style that, unless you know what you're looking at, can look really sloppy, but it's a great storytelling style. So great, in fact, that Keanu Reeves sought him out to draw Berserker. Frank Miller is a writer, but he's a storyteller, and he doesn't just tell it by words. He tells it in images, and he's not as worried about you staring at a picture for half a day as he is you getting through the whole story. Frank Miller is like Will Eisner. He is not trying to be the greatest artist, not trying to be the greatest writer. He is an all-in-one. So when you look at Frank's work, you don't, if you're looking at it for the art or reading it for the story, either way, you're going to find things that disappoint you. But if you look at the overall and know that he penciled it, he plotted it, he wrote it, he drew it, he inked it, and he did everything but color it. And then chances are Lynn Barnes, which is his ex-wife, colored it. So, you know, pretty much it's a one-man show. That's the same thing with Will Eisner. Will Eisner was a one-man show. The Spirit was his baby. He's actually famous for saying that he thinks that the artist and the writer and the colorist and the letterer should all be a very, very close team. So close in fact that they should just be the same person. And his philosophy, when you read his books and you read the explanations, it's excellent. It's very hard to find flaw in the fact that he's saying you should be able to do everything yourself. It should be your story. It should be your work. It's not, shouldn't be, you shouldn't be drawing X-Men, or you shouldn't be worried about drawing Superman or the Flash or any of that. You should create your own. You should have 100% control. You should tell the stories that you want to tell for the reasons that you want to tell them, and you should make 100% of the profit. So I think he's absolutely right. Frank Miller is an exemplar. Like there's a book called Miller Eisner or Eisner Miller, and it is a conversation between Will Eisner and Frank Miller, and they do not agree on everything, but they agree on a lot. And when you look at the conversation and you follow the conversation and you see where they do and don't agree, it's almost all the time they agree on storytelling method. Now we're talking about sequential storytelling method. Frank Miller, you talk about him being a writer. Well, how much actual writing is in Sin City? Not a lot. He's taken manga, which are pretty commonly 3-panel pages with very little words, and given it the Western comic art flair. So, is he a great writer? He's not prose heavy, certainly. I mean, he used to be a lot more prose heavy in his younger days. And if you look at his stuff, he goes through stages. He goes through, he experiments. He's constantly kind of changing and feeling stuff out and seeing what he can get away with and seeing what he can do. And that's stuff that you wouldn't really know to look for unless you read this conversation. It's well worth reading that book. Will Eisner's got 3 books of his own on comics, and he was a comic artist before there were comic books. He was a comic artist before there were really comic strips. And some of the stuff that I read that he wrote in his sequential art, and he wrote about expressions and all that. This is all stuff that they do today. That's why there's a Will Eisner Award. That's why the Eisners are one of the most prestigious awards, because this guy knew everything about it. He knew everything about every bit of the comics process from beginning to end, from where they were printing in black and white, when they started color, why they did what they did with color. He even, even reading that book told me, like, if you've read a comic book and you've seen there's kind of weird words that are in bold, words that don't necessarily need emphasized or don't necessarily make sense to be emphasized from your read through, then you'll recognize that they stand out. Those words stand out. And that's the point, because those bold words, that means if Will Eisner or Frank Miller were making words bold on a page, it would be so you can look at the pictures and at a glance pick up those bold words and know what's going on in the story. That was kind of amazing for me because I didn't realize that. He's basically summing up what's on the page in bold words. Very clever. If you haven't read, really read Miller's stuff, or haven't read Will Eisner's stuff, I advise you pick up a Contract with God or the Sin City collection. I mean, pretty much anything. You can't go wrong with either one of them, but A Contract with God is a really kind of pretty potent story all in all. I've read a few, and that's one of the good things about that book, or those books, those series of books, is that it's got excerpts from his own work. So when he gives an example, he's actually giving you an example that he's worked on. He's not guessing what the artist or author meant. He's got some personal insight into it. He does he does a scene with like one of the warriors, pretty much from the movie The Warriors, on the rooftops of New York, but it's really Shakespeare or Hamlet or something like that. I can't remember to quote it, but It's basically classic literature that he retold with images that didn't exist when that literature or those plays were written. And it's fitting because it tells a story. It tells a story he wants to tell. It really, really sinks the point home. There's only few comic books that I've seen that happen with, and one of them is it's a Wolverine that was drawn by I think Andy Kubert and written by Larry Hama, and this whole thing is one story that's being told in caption boxes, and then another story that's being told in the artwork, and it's Wolverine on a search through the city. So he's doing the building tops and rooftops and all this stuff, and it's this girl that I'm I want to say she's an abused girl that's run away, and Wolverine's going to find her to protect her. But the story's that much more potent because you don't know that until actually they end up coming together. You read The Dark Knight Returns, and it's an awesome book. Yep. Yeah. So when you read that, The Dark Knight or Dark Knight Returns, and you looked at the images, they are basically storyboards. So they're not necessarily great art. No panel of it's something that you would say this is a great piece and whatever. But you definitely get the idea of him rushing somewhere on a horse. You definitely get the idea that the story is progressing in such a way because it's necessary to progress in such a way. And that's what you're doing. That's what an artist's job is in the comic book industry, is to sell that story, to turn that page, to make you turn the page to know what's going on, to want to know what's going on. This is so much more toned into bluish brown than you're seeing on that screen, or at least than I'm seeing on the screen when I look up. This looks really, really red on the screen, like orange tones or sepia tones, or which is what I really wanted to get, is a sepia tone, but this looks even more orange on that camera, but it looks more brown in person. Yeah, Frank Miller's not the only. He's not the be all end all. Like I was saying about Ron Garney, he did such a good job that Keanu Reeves sought him out to do Berserk, and they're just finishing up Berserk, and they've got plans to do something. Keanu Reeves alluded to doing Berserk as a movie. Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's toned orange, but truly it's not toned orange. And I could adjust the camera, but I would have to go into the settings of the camera. I think it'd be waiting a half an hour for me to get all that shit right. So we'll try to get that for next time. You can still see the tones, and it's actually, like I said, actually originally I wanted to have those redder tones. Now you'll notice that this paper is not crinkling and bending, which watercolors and acrylics tend to do, especially when you put a lot of water into it to thin it out. So that's why I'm using mostly thinner instead of water. The water I was using to thin the actual, like clean the brush or start out with a cleaner tip the next time I dip into it, because brushes tend to gum up a little bit. But because this is watercolor paper, it's really meant to take a little bit more water. Still not meant to take a whole ton of water, and it's not meant to take super thick paint because that will make it curl too. I found that, like, if I'm painting on comic book paper, the Strathmore Bristol board, it works better if I tape it down. But the problem is that no matter how light the artist tape is that I use, it still peels shit up. And granted, it peels it up from the borders or whatever, but I don't want it to peel any of it up. So I don't know if you noticed, but I left a light edge right along underneath of this band in his skin. That's because when the skin's pushed in, that's why I shadowed it over here. It shadows from the opposite side of the light. In this case, it's from above. And where it presses in against the skin, it's a little bit lighter. So I'm leaving it a little bit lighter so that there's this subconscious knowledge that it's pressing into the skin. If I'd have thought it out a little bit more, I'd probably put that on the other side, like switch them to the opposite sides, and I still can, like when the time comes for me to actually paint the real paints on it, not just the value study. So much to paint. This is why patience is the key. I haven't begun to touch the rocks and stuff, unless it's an accident. This is the same way I paint with watercolors, except for that sometimes I layer a different color over it. And that serves a purpose too. Like, that's stuff that we're not going to do with the underpainting, but light bounces through that painting and back up through, and it kind of blends colors or changes colors when it passes through. Like right now, this is a very blue light passing through and bouncing back up. But if I had an orange light or a little bit of a yellow light, it would create an entirely different tone. And that's probably part of the problem with how red this is because I set it up using a warmer light. But I figured I didn't need to use the warmer light this time, because really what I was doing is just doing this underpainting. Still learning about the process. Now I'm going to go really light again. I have to pull this plate over to look to see the glare to tell where the blending is. That's the only downfall to using a paper plate, but I really, really want to light. And once you hit that darker tone, you've committed. So I think because it's taken so long, I might not get all the way through with everything. I don't want to keep everybody for hours and hours just watching me do the same thing over and over in tone work. So once I finish the main figure, I'm probably going to call it for the night, because it's over 2 hours already. Not everybody was here when I started, so it's not like I have been incessant about it, but still, also, if you really want me to go on, I will go on for a while, but don't want to put anybody in a place where they're bored out of their mind or not wanting to stay for the full time or whatever. All the things that I'm doing, they apply across the board. I'm toning the whole thing. I'm not going to change the way I'm toning. It's going to be the same scales to tone. Like you see other colors on my plate, but all those colors are there to mix. And I need to mix up some more. Red. Sap green. And you see I need more sap green than red. That's because the sap green is semi-transparent. I'm sure the red is too, but it's less so. You see it mixes a very dark brown. Which is the color I've been using, which is why I said it's really weird to see it as red hues when I look at the screen. I wonder if I pull this closer to the camera, it's probably not gonna, but I wonder if it'll show more of the true. It doesn't look like it. It still shows it as a red tint. It's weird that it showed it on the plate as closer to a true color. What I'm doing here is there's no thinner in this right now. This is straight out the tube. So what that's called, for anyone that doesn't know, is saturated. Simon Bisley uses everything. He uses a lot of. He's more known for his acrylics than his oils, but he does paint with oils too. Joe Jusko paints with acrylics. He is incredible with acrylics, but he has a totally different method. He paints a masking agent over anything that he doesn't want to paint roughly, and then he just hits it, and then he peels the masking layer off and cleans it up. Simon Bisley, I don't know if you've seen it, but he has a video called Shock of Green, and it's him painting the Joker. Giant. It's a giant size painting, and he just proves how much of a nut he can be. He's like painting with his sock and, well, his foot with his sock on, and he's chipping into the, I think it's a piece of drywall, I think, that he's painting on, that he's primed. But he takes a knife to that prime too. And I'm not sure because he doesn't say it, but I think maybe he might have used impasto, which is kind of like plaster that you can texture something with, and you can paint over it and get that texture. James Gurney does discussion about that too. He's got so much information. Anyone that wants to paint that's not utilizing James Gurney's YouTube channel, website, classes, then they're really missing out. Man is a national treasure as far as art goes, and he's a really kind-hearted guy too. So on top of that, he's very patient, which Even I can't claim to be patient. I'm not patient. But he certainly is. He's, and that's something, no matter who you are, artist wise, you're going to be asked the same questions over and over and over and over again. And if you get to be a famous artist and a well practiced artist and a skilled artist, you can't really lose touch because those people that are asking you are people that didn't learn and they want to learn. I was poor, so I couldn't go to art college. I had to learn from other people. Fortunately, people like Steve Ferris and Joe Jusko and a bunch of other guys, Den Bavay, that offered any information that I needed. They shared freely. They weren't picky about it. So that's kind of why I try to be the same when it comes to art, is that these guys, they gave so much to me that I want to give back in any way that I can. Like there's no way I could earn the stuff that I earned or learned, not earned. I couldn't have went to college, and by the time that I could have went to college, wouldn't have made a difference. When I started oil painting, there were guys there to help me to learn how to oil paint. When I asked about acrylics, some of the best in the business at acrylics were free to hand. It's always been kind of amazing to me, and I've always been appreciative of it. So if I can give back in the same way that they gave, I will. It's not to say that I can. I'm no Joe Jusko. Whoa. Yeesh. Forced to rinse the brush. I really got to start timing myself to find out how long this takes for me. So far, Copic Stream has taken me 3.5 hours. Finishing touches on my Cthulhu painting took me 3 hours. I'm about 2 hours and 15 minutes into this. Although nobody's saying they're leaving or they quit, that's a good thing, I guess. Maybe somebody is saying that. I don't know if you saw that, but I drew this in blue pencil before I started. And that wet brush brought that up. So I'm blending a little bit of blue brush. Or a little bit of blue with my brush, but what I'm trying to do is get wet, less saturated strokes, but the wetness of that less saturation tends to bring out that stuff. I thought I erased very well, but apparently I didn't. So I guess lesson for anyone who didn't, you can recover. I see other people have joined us to watch. Feel free to hop right in the chat if you got any questions or want to make comments. That's what it's there for. And if you like the content you're seeing, please like and subscribe. That helps me build the channel and eventually maybe monetize it. And if that's the case, then I can afford to do this all day long. Nobody wants me to do this all day long. But I'll be doing scripting, layouts, pages. Paintings of different scales and different mediums. I don't know. I haven't done this one before. In case anyone missed it, I was asked how long it takes me to do. I used to think I was quicker. Maybe I was quicker at one time. Now I'm not as worried about being quick as I'm worried about doing what I'm trying to do. I think that's the best advice I can give you too, is that don't worry about getting done at a certain time unless you've got a deadline. If you've got a deadline, that's something different. But if you don't have a deadline, don't worry about it. Just get it done well. And if you did it well, it won't matter how long it takes because you've done well. People always love a good job over a quick job. Even though if you've got a deadline, then that's important that it has to be out on a certain time. So I've done the watercolors that I was showing earlier. A lot of those I've done in one sitting, or they're one sitting and then come back and tweak a little bit here and there. I've had a lot of things affect my speed over time. Operations, health conditions. So that's kind of why I don't really want to say how long something is going to take either, because I'm not as worried about time as I'm worried about what I'm getting out of it. I don't have any rush on time. I don't have any deadlines. I don't have any fear of not getting something done quick enough. I don't have a show popping up that I'm trying to get a portfolio ready for, or any of that. It's all a matter of I want to do a job that's so good that when I'm going to show this to Andy when we're done. I showed him the blacks before I started the line work. Of course, I didn't have the trees and the backgrounds and all this other stuff in it. It was just core draft, but I showed it to him. I don't think he know from what I showed him where I'm going with it. A piece of eraser. But that's just as well, because it'll be a surprise for him. He knows the character. It's his character. And I've stayed fairly true to his character. This is the Axis character wields. This is the bottom of the Axis character wields. That's the pauldron that he designed his character to wear. The armband, though I've seen a few different changes in the armbands and the bracers, which is wrist armor. It's pretty consistent with what he's represented himself. That's pretty much all you can do, because if he changes it while he's doing the comic in small amounts or whatever, then I'm not going to know until the comic is done what exactly he wants it to look like. And that's a trick, because he is still drawing the comic. He's like 32 pages in or something like that. But I really like the comic. I really support the idea of him delving into fantasy again. It's they're claiming on the campaign, in case any of you don't know, it's an Indiegogo campaign, so you can go there and back core draft. You're paying in advance, but there's a whole bunch of covers that you can select from, and there's different art that you can get along the way. Not just different covers by different artists, which there are some really good artists, not the least of which is Andy himself. But they're billing it as Conan meets Game of Thrones. From what I've seen, it's more of Conan meets Fire and Ice, but hey, who's complaining either way, right? I'm excited to see it. I did back it. I don't have a whole lot of money to back a whole lot of comics, so I'm very choosy on which ones I do back. And since I'm a fantasy head, and everyone that knows me knew that all along, I definitely back this one. Anyone who hasn't seen it, check it out. He's got a video up. He's got, I think, the first 8 pages up on his site. I think that's actually even linked, so you can read the first 8 pages of them. It starts with he's a lion clan, and then there's a snake clan and other animal clans, but the snake clan's attacking them, and wiping out his village, and he's got to survive and then figure out who's behind it, because obviously they are not behind it. So it's a little bit mystery and a lot of action adventure. There's some gore. He eviscerates somebody with his axe, like in the first couple of pages, and how cool is that, right? It also kind of has a touch of Thundar in it, as he's got a sorceress friend that accompanies him on his mission. I don't think he has an Ukla. Everybody should have an Ukla. Maybe I'll pitch it to Andy when this is done. Maybe I'll pitch it to the writer. I know him too a little bit. We're getting to know each other. We have a lot of things in common, I should say. Thundar, Conan, those are things in common. If we're going to base a relationship on some stuff like that, that's the stuff to do it, right? I guess I missed part of the conversation. Only if they can mock you for what? The writer and the artist, you mean? One of the things I really like about Andy is, of all the comic artists that I've talked to, he's one of the few that's really down to earth, and you feel like you're talking to a person, not somebody that's an artiste, or that you should owe something to because they draw. I do like Andy a lot, and Dennis is the writer, and he's a pretty good guy from what I've seen too. I think they make fun of each other enough for to cover that aspect. They have a show on YouTube called the Dennis and Andy Show, where they talk about rare comics they picked up at comic conventions, or they do movie reviews. Okay, I'm going to dip a little bit of water into here because I want to thin it out further. These are metal. And as I said when I started, this is an underpainting, so I don't expect it to stay the way that it is. It's just a base coat and the tonal painting to follow later on. For this, is really, I'm trying to cover. Ha ha ha, it's a knee slapper. I didn't say Ukla Lamak, I just said Ukla. Everybody already knows he's a mock. Apparently, I didn't think about it being a mock. Yeah, Dan, like I said, I'm probably not long for it. I can paint this off stream. I wanted to lay this out on stream because a lot of people that I talk to either don't really understand the concept of an underpainting or still really want to see it done anyway. So aside from the discoloration in the on the camera lens, the tonal quality shows up, and pretty much everyone that's curious about it or wanted to know anything about tonal painting or the idea of tonal painting should have it down by now. All this stuff is where the shades and shadows go for those who don't speak the lingo. For those who do, it's a value painting that you can refer to while you're painting. So you're painting over values later on that are dry. You don't have to ask yourself, where's this going to be? Where's the shadow going to be? Where's the light source coming from? Because all those decisions have already been made and laid out. It's very handy to have. It's a little bit tedious for some people, but I'm old-fashioned in the way that I like to have that because I'm kind of control freak when it comes to that. I want to know what's going on ahead of time. And I've got to mix some more. Yeah, we saw Holly and Sean today, Dan. And we intend to go up and see them too, and that's in Augusta, so we have to kind of, well, we don't have to swing through there, but we could. I'd like to have a chance to come up and visit for a while. I think that'll be a little bit different now because Amanda's not saddled to Walmart anymore. He's not even talking about what I thought he was talking about. Where's my head at today? You won't quit your day job. That's funny. Don't quit your day job until you're getting paid writer money. Like million copy bestseller writer money. I don't think you teach your job just for a paycheck, though, or do your job just for a paycheck, though, do you? It's like this. I don't do this for a paycheck. I do this for the enjoyment of doing it. I'm just lucky enough that sometimes it gives me money, too. Brett, you have to let me know when you're really wanting to invite. Maybe I can get Bonar to come on the show. I love that idea. Streams SCTV. No, you wouldn't do your job without a paycheck? Well, you wouldn't do your job every day without a paycheck. I can't imagine with the type of work you do that there's not alternate reasons, because I can't imagine that you get paid well enough. I guess there's worse cities, right? You gonna be ready for Sunday, or it's yeah, right. Yeah, I know that. That's not what I was saying. I said not just for it originally. You're gonna be doing football, or you're gonna want to be doing the group. I don't even know if we're gonna be able to watch football. We don't have access. We're just been using streaming services for everything, so we don't have regular TV. And nobody wants to spend the money or the time on NFL Sunday Ticket. No? All right. Well, Jake and I were watching the playoffs the weekend before last, so I don't know if that's going to have a bearing on him. But I don't know if we're going to be able to watch. And I know Eli, he's all right. Nice hanging out with you, Vincent. It's the first time you hung out on the channel, so it's nice to see you. Once I finish this up and finish the underpainting, I'll post it so that you can see it. Is he gone already? Yeah, I don't plan on staying for the whole underpainting. Right now, I'm just nailing the stuff that is on the main character. What I'm trying to do is cover all the spots that are colored black by pen. So there's little white spots if you look really, really close. And I'm just trying to cover them up with the same hue that I've been using. I subscribed to your channel. Pretty sure you had to have noticed. I watched the first video, but we were out on the road, so well, I guess it's the second video maybe. We were out on the road, so I don't know how much I caught of it, so I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again. I'm talking about sharing writing. I don't know if I actually caught why you were saying that you didn't wholeheartedly trust the Google Docs. Of course, if you remember, I've always said that. I don't trust anyone. Oh, I thought you were talking about... Should I unsubscribe, or you plan on building it? I thought you were talking about building your channel. Maybe it was a different channel? I just followed you back from where you followed my channel. Right. Now, you're not doing Bonar though, right? Don't get me wrong, I'd love it if you were. I can have you on and I know who I'm talking to, even though it's a different persona, but yeah, that's what I thought you said. How old's your son? The one that's going to be the voice? That's a little strange, isn't it? Considering the subject. Damn. I don't think he stayed. I think he just popped on to say something. Brother, you gonna be around for a little bit? Because I think I'm gonna kill this stream. It's, well, maybe 10 minutes, because then it'll be 3 hours again. And I'm gonna kill this stream and then go into a more relaxed chair. Kick back for a few. You're writing? Yep. Cool. How's that coming? I'm finding I'm progressing a little bit on Snargy every morning. I know where he's going now. Know where it's going now. And I think I'm just about to set up for the final scene. Right? I always have this place, I think about 2/3 of the way through, where I know where I've got to go. It's just filling in the blanks to get there. Generally, I have an idea from when I start, but this time it was about making money. I was being paid, so I was like, oh, I've got to do something. Plus, it's a character I already like, I already know. That makes it a little bit easier. But I definitely didn't have a set plan all the way through. I knew where it had to end because, well, you know too where the story picks up because it's a prequel. So you know it can't go past a certain part, and you know it seems like there's a already pre-written beginning for it. Because you know his next adventure and how he gets on that adventure. And I think that's probably where this is ending is the call to arms for the next story, I guess. You know, I never set out to write comedy. It just wanted to be. He just, like everything about the narrative, just wants to be some smart ass observation or another. Like when I read, I know it's contrary to popular belief, but when I read The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett, it kind of pissed me off. It didn't have a set ending. It was almost as if it was just saying, I can just fuck around, you know. He had some stuff that seemed like it was setting and beginning a story, and then all of a sudden it would go off the rails in a totally unexpected fashion that had nothing to do with what was going on before. It was only slightly related. I never really understood that. All right. Murphy's Law in effect here. Ow, ow, ow. So I was pretty sure I didn't understand writing comedy. That kept me really kind of from wanting to. Because if this was the successful or the best in the fantasy field, and I can't imagine why people would read that. Like, I know it's the best I can say is that it's not the story, it's the journey along the story where he can explore things that are stupid and try to make everyday things, make fun of everyday things, I guess. But never really made sense. Then I started writing Snargy. Yeah, I wasn't really trying to be funny. That's kind of what is funny about it is I never set out to be funny at all. I set out to explore what happened to the Dark One's minions after they lost. It was really inspired by All Quiet on the Western Front and the sequels. And I just wanted to kind of turn it towards Orc. And then the next thing you know, it's like, nope, I want to be something different. I do really like the character, but I never really. I guess I'm a smart ass in real life, but I'm way more serious minded. If that makes any sense. I don't think jokes and punchlines. I, make fun of song lyrics or have a funny observation here or there, but nothing I would ever think of in those terms. All right, so it's been 3 hours, and I'm gonna shut down. Brett, I'll seek you out afterwards if you're still around, because probably I'm not going anywhere, but I don't want to make this any more painful for anybody else to watch than it already is. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks everybody that's watched for watching. Anyone that watches at a later date, if you like the content, like and subscribe. Have a great night.